Sean O'Malley defeated Aljamain Sterling to capture the UFC Bantamweight title, as you all probably know by now. Dana White already said Sean O'Malley's a superstar, but he's his promoter. I want to know, what do you guys expect from his title reign? What kind of a ride are we in for, fellas? Is he a superstar in your eyes? Mike, we go to you for this first take.
Ooh, a superstar. I don't know if I put him right there just yet, but he's definitely a star within like the UFC context, right? Like he already feels like one of the biggest guys on the roster, and that he's just got that additional layer that pretty much everyone is craving for and chasing. But is he a crossover star yet? Has he reached that, Conor McGregor, Ronda Rousey level, things like that? I think we need to slow our roll on that a little bit, but this is just the start in theory, right? Like he's still in his 20s. He just won the belt. He's got all the time in the world. This is the proper step, but you have to see what happens from here. But it's going to be challenging, right? Like all the other things are going in his direction, but he's got to keep winning. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. And in this bantamweight division that is ridiculously stacked, so much talent from top to bottom, no easy layup fights coming his way anytime soon. That's what's going to make the difference. If he can put together a reign and some defenses, then everything changes. He's going to have the world at his fingertips. He's going to be able to, do whatever he wants, call his shots, things like that. But can't understate how difficult that's going to be. This division is absolutely insane. Everyone is going to know what it's going to mean for their career to beat Sean O'Malley, to be the one to take that belt away from him. And it's going to be a huge deal for them. So anytime he gets in there, you're going to have people coming for his head, people knowing what a victory over him will be. So it's going to be tough for him to stay on top. But if he can do it, yes, he is poised for superstar status.
All right. Nolan, you were there in Boston. You're from Boston. And do you agree with Mike? I mean, the way the picture was being painted was that there was pink everywhere, I guess Sugar Show merch everywhere. So what's maybe one level below superstar if you don't think he's a superstar? Huge star? What do you think?
Yeah, I think he could be a pretty big star. It's kind of hard to place him because I think Mike's right. I think like the Conor McGregor Rousey level is, I don't want to say unobtainable for people, but I just don't even think it's something when somebody comes into to their own and kind of breaks through. It's almost impossible to see them getting that far. But I think he's kind of like whatever the step is before that, right? Like even looking at the roster right now, I mean, you obviously got John Jones, years of name recognition and him being the GOAT. People are very interested in John. But outside of that, I mean, I think Sean kind of has the potential here to kind of take that number 2 slot. I mean, I think Israel Adesanya is globally more popular than people give him credit for. I mean, we see the numbers on these people and we kind of understand that. But Sean O'Malley, it just felt like an iconic moment on Saturday. It was one of those times that we talk about where maybe things didn't necessarily make sense on paper for him to win coming into this fight in the eyes of a lot of people. But it was just the tale that was meant to be written, man. He stepped up. He had kind of the perfect build-up to the UFC championship, to be honest with you. I know it was under fire. He didn't do the right things merit-wise to get in there. He hadn't earned it. He hadn't had a big win, whatever. But, like, at the end of the day, could the UFC had a better build-up for him? Could they have done a better job? Like, think about how many people criticized him and got invested in his story through their doubt of him. I mean, we saw this with Conor McGregor as well. He never fought a wrestler. He never fought anybody good. He fought Chad Mendes, who was hurt. And there was always that doubt. And that doubt is what kind of kept people to come back and back and back. And, I mean, there's still doubt. The fact that he hasn't fought pretty much anyone on the UFC roster right now, O'Malley could fight. There's no fights that have been eliminated. You know, even the fights that he fought guys in the top 10, Pedro Munoz and Chito Vera, he lost to Vera, and the fight against Munoz was a no contest. So outside of, like, I mean, even Jan and Sterling rematches are something that people could down the line, you know, be interested in for different reasons. So I think you can criticize the process, but at the end of the day, it all worked out for the UFC, and they do have a very big bantamweight star in their hand.
Cool. All right. How about you, Goes? What are your thoughts on the potential, maybe superstardom of Sean O'Malley? Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself as well.
Well, I think you and I have done this plenty of times on MMA Junkie Radio. We have to define that star ranking, right? I feel like there's a star, there's a superstar, and then there's a mega star. I think a mega star is someone like a Conor McGregor or Ronda Rousey, as was talked about before. I have Sean O'Malley in that superstar area, right? We've seen it before. The guy walks into a room and it just lights up, man. People love this guy. And how many times does this guy have to get a win before we stop calling them upsets, right? It's just one after another. I think we have to give him his respect at this point. The UFC, they've lost some pretty big stars along the way in the last couple of years, but this emergence of these new fighters, these new cats that are kind of taking these big steps forward, it's really making the future look really bright for guys like Sean O'Malley for the UFC. In the cage, I mean, dude, he performed, man. I mean, the worst thing you could do is give that guy any space, and that's what he got. You know, the second you give him space is when he starts to feel comfortable and he really lets it out. And he did that on Aljamain Sterling. And Aljamain Sterling, I mean, that's a tough guy. It's a guy that we were all kind of calling the GOAT going into this fight. So for him to be able to accomplish that at an early age like this, I think it's pretty big for himself. It's big for the UFC. But as Mike said, and Nolan said as well, like, it's going to be tough to hold that. And it's nothing against Sean O'Malley. It's just kind of par for the course. Anybody that were to take that strap, I really feel like in the next year and a half, we're going to appreciate just how good Aljamain Sterling was because of what we're going to see at the top of that division, because it's killer after killer. And to be able to fight through all that, I don't know if anybody else can do something like that. So this reign, I don't know how long it's going to last, but it's going to be really tough. And they're already, you know, in the chat, Paul M, he makes a good point. He says, Patchy #1. Hey, I'm not saying that's too crazy. If you look at Patchy Mix and what he's been able to do and the type of skill set he has, if you matched him up with Sean O'Malley, that'd be a hell of a fight too. So I don't know, man. This division is absolutely nuts across the board in mixed martial arts.
Yeah, everybody thinks Patchy backpacking, but that last title that he won was a wicked knee that he threw at him. You like that, Nolan? Wicked? Did I say it right?
You got it. Nailed it.
All right. Just trying to fit in here to keep with the theme. Yes, like Ghost said, the comments. I'm going to get to some of them. Bring them. Questions, comments. The better they are, the more likely you are to get on here. Okay, here's Alexander Wayne. He says he said he was going to get the finish when Aljo rushes in. Yep. Sniped him, man. He leaned back and boom, countered really, really nicely. Alan says that is what Connor also said. Also, give me a little more context there about what you're talking. But thank you for chiming in, Alan. Pro Fights Info. Happy Monday morning, gents. Fun fight of fights this past weekend. Yes, I would agree with that one. All right, so just a couple follow-ups here because this is a huge topic with Sean O'Malley there. A lot of people have been blowing me up as well. He's talking about his first title defense being against Cheeto Vera, the guy he didn't lose to, but really did. But is it too early to call the shots here, guys? Now, remember, the more title defenses you have, look at what Izzy's kind of been doing. Izzy has a little bit more weight to throw around. He partners up more with the UFC's big brass and says, this is what I think we should do or whatever. Others are just told to show up and defend. But O'Malley does seem to have some stock, like we just talked about. Megastar, superstar, huge star. I don't know. Dvalishvili was there. Sandhagen was there. Both of them just had recent surgeries. Dvalishvili's a little bit ahead, I think, on his timeline. You saw him kind of grappling with his partner there, Aljamain, throughout fight week, light partnering, but still. And Aljo is now technically out of the way. However, Aljo wants an immediate rematch. So unpack this for me, Mike. We go back to you.
Yeah, I think it's more of like a timing thing, right? I think you laid it out pretty well there. I don't know if it's necessarily like calling the shot more so than being logical and what makes sense right now. You lay it out there, like it's definitely not going to be Corey Sandhagen. And it all depends too, right? Like, does Sean O'Malley get his wish of wanting to fight in December at UFC 296 in Las Vegas? He made it pretty clear all the lead up that that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be active, get right back in there. But you see this post he put out last night with like all the reactions to the knockout and the fallout. And he said not only like this muscle injury and like his ribs that he had, he seemingly had like a knee injury, some other stuff going on. So like, how healthy is he really? We see this all the time. Champions, people who become champion for the first time, say one thing about what they want out of their title reign leading up. And when they win that belt, it's suddenly like, well, there's no more perfect time to get this surgery that I've been pushing off for a long time. And they're maybe out like 6 months, a year. This happens pretty frequently, honestly. And I don't blame them, right? You put in all the work, you take the risks leading up to that championship moment. And then on the back end of it, that's when you have the leverage and the power to make a move like that. So we'll see what he ends up doing. But if he wants a quick turnaround, if he wants December, it's got to be Cheeto Vera. I mean, this is a perfect storyline for the UFC. You can't draw it up any better. Sean O'Malley can go in there in his first title defense, avenge his only loss. that would be like huge stuff. It reminds me of kind of the older school, like Chuck Liddell's title reign, when they were trying to just cross off all his losses by bringing in like Jeremy Horn and, doing the Babalu fights and things like that. Because it's great. I mean, if you can say Sean O'Malley will claim he's undefeated, but if he's able to avenge that loss, there would be much more merit behind it. And people love Cheeto Vera. You can sell that fight. It all makes sense to me right now. If everyone was healthy, absolutely it should be Merab Dvalishvili first, Corey Sandhagen second. But we talk about this like every single week when we're trying to spin things forward. It's all about timing. It's all about who's healthy, who's not, all that stuff. And it seems right now this is a pretty perfect fight. And I think it's a great opportunity. I'd be disappointed if the UFC didn't pounce on it, because you never know. Cheeto could go in there and lose his next fight to someone else, and then it just doesn't line up. Him winning that fight against Pedro Munoz, it was perfect. I hope they pulled the trigger on this.
Yeah, you're right. He did say he did not grapple for 6 weeks before this fight. That was incredible to hear. All right, Nolan, your thoughts on this? It's a lot to unpack in this division. There are a lot of killers, a lot of possibilities, and again, it seems to me when you reach about the third title defense, you are kind of in that area where you can maybe request the rematch. It all depends. But as Goes has often said a long time, he just doesn't seem like a one of the darlings for the UFC's big brass either. Like maybe, I don't know if he's difficult or for whatever reason they just haven't taken to him. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think like Mike said, I mean, Merab, in a merit-based world where everybody was healthy, that would be a no-brainer. I mean, you look at the body of work he's done without having a title shot, that's the guy that you should match it up. But I'm not really sure. I'm kind of getting mixed messages from Merab in general about how his hand is. Like in the interview I did, I think he's a guy that, like, if his leg was falling off, he would take a fight. So it's kind of hard to gauge, like, is he actually better? Is it getting better? It's still, he showed me his hand and it still looked visibly like it had some issues going on, swelling, bruising. Granted, this fight would be, 4 months away. So just to me, I think at this point in time, if there's any question marks, I'm sure that the UFC would like to go in the direction of Cheeto Vera, just because I think that's just like the star builder fight for O'Malley. It's a good fight. It's something that, Cheeto's got. He won on Saturday. It's kind of aligned that way. They have history. You got the, Cheeto's obviously very popular in Latin America, so you can bring that aspect into it. There's a lot that can go on, and essentially they'd end up with an extra title fight that perhaps they didn't expect to have this year. And if you look at the end of this year, It's going to be stacked. I mean, 294, 295, 296. I think we're in for a really solid streak of pay-per-views right there. So this would just be essentially an added bonus. But in terms of Aljamain Sterling in a rematch, like you just mentioned, I think as much as, again, I think in other divisions, and you might see the champion get kind of the benefit of the doubt there, but a second round knockout, I think, will maybe deter the UFC from turning that one around. But it's a fight that's there. I don't think Aljo, if it's time, if he just has to wait out for his moment, or if he has to fight again, I don't think, he's one fight away from being able to really claim that he's earned it again. So, by the way, he handled the loss great. I think out of all the champions I've ever seen lose their belt, I would tell future champions to look at Aljamain Sterling and the way he's carried himself, not hiding from it, accepting it, giving honest answers, refusing to use any excuses. So shout out to him for that. But I think despite that, he'll have to do something before the UFC just, kind of rebooks that one.
Yeah, and Conor McHater, which is what I call him on fight nights, although he was Conor McGregor this weekend, he informed us he won't be fighting in December. So you're right. It does look like they need somebody. We were saying Cheeto Vera, it's right there for the taking. Get the finish, say something cool on the mic, and back the champion into a corner, whoever, we didn't know who it would be at that time, but he probably got the best endorsement possible, and that's from the champion now, the guy that holds the belt, who wants to fight him. So decision, finish, it doesn't matter. He wants Cheeto Vera. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's kind of the performance that he needed, right, to be able to do this, because Dvalishvili is the guy that deserves it. Now, as Nolan said, we just don't really know. Like, we see him around town. He's kind of still got that brace on his arm. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in that locker room and find out what the conversation between Aljo and Dvalishvili was like, right? Because he's been the ultimate team player. He's been waiting for his buddy to do his thing, but now he's kind of backtracking a little bit on that, and I understand why. And he was very forthcoming, very truthful in his answer. But that creates a very difficult situation for those two. So I'd like to see how that plays out. But if you're the UFC, all those cards that are on the table, you just don't want to miss out on this fight. And I think you have enough of an argument with injuries and what's going on that you could probably make it, and people aren't going to really throw rankings in your face or anything like that. I think we're all just going to kind of understand. And it's a fight that I think a lot of us will be interested in.